This is a story of hope and glory and just what God's done in my life. I always loved Jesus even when I was a little girl. I just loved worshiping and listening to praise music. But then things kind of got dark. I started school and all the teachers were concerned and would contact my parents because I wasn't speaking. By the time I was in high school, I actually kind of became pretty reckless. I just was angry. I didn't know why I was so angry. Again, there was just this grip on me and I wasn't sure what it was. So I went through high school just loving life and enjoying my friends and enjoying the party lifestyle and all that high school has to offer. And then I graduated. And after I graduated, I was kind of at this point where I'm like, oh shoot, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I never felt like I could really enjoy life. It was always this temporary enjoyment that I would have. And so by the time I graduated, I was kind of at this standstill where I'm like, what am I gonna do? I went into a community college and I started to take some classes, but it was on my 19th birthday that I met someone and I fell in love. And that changed my life. It was probably a couple dates in. He said to me, do you know Jesus? And I said, I know Jesus. You know, I grew up in church. There was something about that night when he asked me, I felt a conviction in my heart. And I went home and I went into my parents' laundry room and I once again recommitted my life to Jesus. So that night I felt a change. Like I really felt like, okay, this is what I want. That boyfriend eventually became my husband, and we were looking to each other to fill all the voids in our lives. We didn't know what those voids were, but we were just trying to make it work. By the time we were married, 10 years and 3 kids later, things were really bad. I didn't realize at that point that I was in an abusive relationship, marriage, and the things that he was doing to me was, I didn't realize it was that bad, but it was slowly destroying me. And when I think of abuse or what I knew about abuse when I was younger was it was someone that was beating up someone. And within those 10 years, there were some physical issues, you know, some physical abuse, but it was mostly emotional and mental. I reached out to my family and I was just so ashamed and so embarrassed that I had to admit that I was in this toxic relationship and they thought everything was totally fine, or at least I thought they did. So they told me I need to leave, and so I didn't want to. And so I took my 3 kids and I moved to my parents, and it was just 24 hours. You know, I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave and he's gonna change and things are gonna be better. And my sister said to me, you know, I know of a pastor that could probably help you guys, that could help him. And so I said, all right, who is it? I want help. I want to be together. I want to have a healthy, happy marriage. And she mentioned Pastor Chris at Abundant Life Community Church. I called him and he right away answered the phone, and I told him the situation of what was going on. And he was so gracious and he was like, yeah, come in tomorrow, 8 a.m. That morning is a morning I'll never forget. I just remember the presence of the Lord. I didn't totally know the presence of God at that time in my life, but I clearly remember it. And I remember feeling this peace that like I couldn't explain. And Pastor Chris was looking at my husband and saying, you know, you're in a covenant relationship with her and the way you're treating her is not what you promised to honor and cherish her. And he had real conviction that day, and I didn't know it, but at that time he experienced deliverance from a stronghold in his life. And so we left and we're like, we're cured, everything's gonna be great. And it was. Temporarily, it was really good. But it was just like a couple weeks later and those demons reappeared. And there was again just these breakout fights where he would smash TVs or he would snap my phone in half. You know, he'd chuck things at me. And during those moments, I remember seeing his eyes and they would just go black. And I didn't know at the time what that was, but I remember I knew I could not change or calm him down. Like he would just be taken over by something. And it terrified me. And meanwhile, I had 3 kids, what I thought were sleeping upstairs, but they probably weren't. I knew that we needed help. We needed more than just one session. So I contacted a counselor. She sat us down and she looked at us and said, "This isn't a marital issue. This is an abuse issue." And that was so weighty for me, because that was the first time my eyes were open to being in an abusive marriage. I didn't understand, I again thought it was more physical. She said, "I will continue to work with Rachel, but Mike, you need to find your own counselor in order for this to work. You two need to work on your individual issues before you can have marriage counseling." She continued to work with me. My husband, on the other hand, he was in and out of counseling. So the next 3 years were really hard years. He would be in and out, so I would have a little bit of hope, and then it would drop again. The abuse began to be more constant. 2017, things were so bad that my family begged and pleaded with me, along with my counselor, to file a restraining order. There was an episode where he came downstairs and he punched 3 holes in the wall. And that night I remember thinking, this isn't like a life worth living. That evening I wrote my counselor an email just saying, "Thanks for everything." And she took that seriously. And looking back, that was a big cry for help. But the next morning I woke up to the police at my door having a well check on me. And I remember my kids seeing that, and I knew I had to go forward with filing a restraining order. And that wrecked me. That's when I hit a real low. And my counselor and my family noticed, and they had me admitted to a mental hospital. They admitted me because they were just in fear of suicide. I really hardened my heart towards God, and I remember laying there. They had to lock me up in an isolation room because of how crazy I was going. I was so angry. I was there, and I look up at the skylight and I said, "Where are you, God?" And I said, "I hate you. I hate you so much. How could you put me in this situation? I've done everything I could to save my marriage, and I'm the victim, and I'm the one that has to be locked up here." I mean, how could a God that says he loves me have me in that situation? I stayed there for a few days. When I left, I had to go to group therapy, and that was every day. I would say I was doing just okay, but honestly, I wasn't at all. My diet consisted of cigarettes, alcohol, and prescription drugs. I was so confused because I was doing everything that the counseling world would tell me. I thought, okay, I'm strong enough. I'm gonna let him move back in. And, I'm strong enough, so I'm not gonna allow him to treat me this way anymore. And my family and my counselor said, "We're done. We're not gonna watch this again. You shouldn't do this," but, they had no control of the decisions I made, so I let him move back in. And within a few weeks, I had never felt more hopeless. And I felt so trapped because I had nowhere to go. I didn't have a job. I lived in this beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood, and all the material things were great. I just was like, all right, I'm gonna handle this, if he just gets mad, a couple times a month, it's okay, I can handle this. But by August of 2018, there was something inside of me that I thought, I can't do this anymore. I literally remember thinking, I can't do it anymore. So I took my kids in the car and we moved to New Jersey with my parents. I slept in a closet and my 3 kids slept in the bedroom outside of the closet. I was actually sitting in my parents' living room and I was watching a documentary on Billy Graham. And in that same time I was watching that documentary, my husband texted me And he said, I love you. I want you back. I want our family back. And, this was something he would do every other week, but he was not willing to do the work to reconcile. So in that moment, I texted him back and I said, my 36 years in God's hands, and that's exactly where it needs to be. And I remember being shocked that I said that. That was the moment I knew God, in my weakness, God made himself strong for me. I knew again about the church that Mike and I first got help at. And I knew of Pastor Natalie, and I knew she helped people that were going through hard times. And that moment, that night I met with her, was a divine appointment.
When Rachel first came into my office, she came as a very scared person. We met first time. Obviously, there is not a lot of trust right away. She came and shared her story that she is a victim of the circumstances that happened. But what I encouraged her, I said that you're not a victim, you're victorious. What happened to you, that was bad, but this is not who you are, and I can help you to get on the other side.
I was so turned off by that. I was very irritated by it, and I honestly, I really didn't like her. I was very mad that she said that because, I'm a victim and none of this is my fault.
When I would meet with her first couple times, she would be very dissociating very often. So I would talk to her, but then I see that she's not there. She would stand up, look in the mirror every couple minutes. She would just go on the phone. You can see I only have a couple minutes attention from her. And in those couple minutes, Holy Spirit will work. So he would work with anything what we give him.
I was delivered from so much oppression, so much demonic oppression. I was delivered from just things that were gripping my mind. Through going to the mental hospital, I was diagnosed with a dissociative personality disorder. I also had a diagnosis of depression and acute anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. I cried out to God again, and that was when I heard the audible voice of God for the first time, and that would forever change my life. And he said, this is so much bigger than you and Mike. And I dropped to my knees because I couldn't believe that he spoke that way. And it's like my eyes were just so opened to the spiritual world and who he is. And my life would never be the same after that day. And week by week, I would meet with Pastor Natalie, and I was just being free of so much brokenness. And I just felt all that lift from me.
I started to hear actually from her parents and the friend of the family who worked for more than 15 years in a psychiatric clinic. He said that we don't cure people. We just give them pill to numb the pain and they keep coming to us. But Rachel is fully present. She can carry the conversation. She actually can take care of her 3 kids fully, knowing what she's doing.
Just in April, a month later, there was a women's conference at Abundant Life Community Church, and that Saturday night, I was baptized in this fire that I can't explain, that I had this encounter with the Lord once again, and he had me engulfed in these holy flames, and he called me once again, and he said, Rachel, I'm calling you closer. You have been marked. You have a call in your life. And I just felt like this flame ignited all over me, and I just felt this holy fire, and I just was overtaken by the presence of God. I heard the Lord just prompt me to throw out all my prescription medicine. I was abusing prescription drugs, but there was something in me that I had to get rid of it. It felt like this stronghold and so I was, I just took all the pills and I just threw them out in the trash. And then a week went by and I had another session with Pastor Natalie, and in that moment, God delivered me of cigarette addiction, of smoking. I gave that up, and I never had a craving again. I never had a desire. God just healed me right then and there of that. He was enjoying getting, like, he already knew me so intimately, but he was revealing himself to me. Like, we were really building this amazing relationship, and I was loving when I would hear his voice, because I heard his voice so clear, and I always knew when he would be talking to me. Layer by layer, we were just dealing with some deep issues. Through that process, I finally got down to the deepest memory, the root of when I was a little girl. I was sexually abused, and I was put in some really bad situations. Those memories were so horrific and terrible that I was able to disassociate and move those deep, dark memories to a really deep part of my brain. But as painful as those memories were to resurface, I finally understood why I made the decisions I made, why I was so reckless, why my voice was, I didn't speak for all those years, and then why I ended up in an abusive marriage. It made sense to me. I was like, oh, this is why. So I would continue to go through the process of that healing. During that time, though, unfortunately, I was really hoping my husband would choose reconciliation. And just like when we first started counseling, he would start the process to get help, but then again, he would always fall back. Unfortunately, by that year, there were no signs of him doing the steps it took to reconcile. And that was really hard, because I had to make the decision to file for divorce. God was so gracious to not only take me through such a hard healing, I was also going through such a hard time in my life personally, because going through a divorce, it was horrific. My car was repossessed in the process. I felt the spiritual battle amplifying when I filed for divorce, which is actually very interesting to me. It was almost like, for some reason, the enemy didn't want me to divorce. I felt this serious battle against it. It's interesting because my anniversary of my marriage and the day of my divorce were the exact same date, 16 years apart. And I almost felt like God was showing me this full circle moment in my life, that even though I didn't want to go through this, he was showing that it was a completion.
Looking back, and it's just so amazing to see the miracle that God has done in her life, that He has absolutely restored her, and right now she is the one who is helping people. She's the one who is seeing those who been where she was, and she can bring them on the other side, because that's the power. When we overcome something, we have power over it, and we can bring people to another side, because our testimony, it's a spirit of prophecy.
I know God has called me to take this story, our story, all over the world, and there's nothing else I want to do. It's all about Him. There's nothing better. There's nothing better than Him. So I just want to pray over you, if this is something that resonates with you, if there's something speaking to your heart, pulling on your heartstrings right now. I just impart right now the healing grace that God gave me, and I speak to those broken pieces of you to come alive and come into alignment. I just declare heaven on earth over your heart. And I just pray peace. I pray the peace that passes understanding. I speak to the mind to be at peace. I speak to the body to be at rest. And I just pray blessing over you in Jesus' name. Thank you, Lord.